Like and subscribe in the next 5 seconds, or this will be in your bed tonight. What's an argument that you lost because the other person was too dumb to understand your logic? My co-worker thinks that police radar guns work by scanning cars to see how hot their engine is, because the faster you go, the hotter it will be, right? I tried explaining how Doppler radar works, but she remains convinced that she's correct, because, and I quote, my husband has one of those radar guns and uses it when he's cooking on the grill. Your husband has an infrared thermometer, you ducking nut. Ask her how fast a steak travels when her husband grills one. Do you know how fast you are going? Medium rare? Guy once told me he was speeding on his motorcycle one night in the freezing cold and was almost caught by a police helicopter with an infrared camera. He said he ditched the copter by taking his coat off and cooling his body down to ambient temperature so the infrared camera couldn't see him. I ignored the fact that he'd be dead if his body temp dropped that much and simply asked why they couldn't pick up the heat from the engine. He said infrared cameras only pick up heat from organic sources. At this point I decided against even trying to argue against any of the ridiculous points he was trying to make and just noped right out of the conversation. Smart thing to do. It doesn't seem likely he'd ever listen to any of your arguments. It's hard to argue with a smart person. It's impossible to argue with a dumb person. Was trying to ask my neighbors to shut their dogs up at night because we can't sleep. But my dogs never bark. There they are, barking in the background. SMH and walk away. I reject your reality and substitute my own. Failure is always an option. A guy I used to work with believed that germs were a myth. He thought bad air is what made you sick. We worked in a meat department. Luckily he would wash his hands and keep stuff clean. But his logic was dirty things make bad air. I tried so hard to convince him germs were real, to the point I would print off literature of various educational levels, from kindergarten to college level, and he believed it was all a hoax. It drove me up a wall. He also believed the moon landing was fake. We got in heated arguments over it, to the point my boss put a ban on discussing the moon at all. Now this is just a hunch, but your co-worker may be a time-traveling gentleman from the Victorian era. Everyone knows it's the miasma. Sewer problems intensify. You should always drive as fast as possible to get the best MPG. Driving twice as fast cuts your travel time in half and cuts your gas usage in half as well. Row. Right, I always knew she liked driving fast. When I let her borrow my car I told to slow down a bit and her response was, sure, no problem. I'm not the one paying for gas. That started the explanation about how stopped cars with the engine running use gas and cars driving fast use gas, so you may as well drive fast and stop using gas sooner. After about an hour I had to give up. I did not get credit in a game of Trivial Pursuit for my guess of King Tutankhamun. The correct answer was, yep, you guessed it, King Tut. I was like 13 and we had just done an Egypt study in school, so I was positive about being correct and pretty proud for knowing it. I once got the question which James Bond movie has an unhappy ending, so of course I answered on Her Majesty's Secret Service, which ends with his new wife being murdered just after their wedding. The answer on the card was none of them. I guess they really didn't like Diana Rigg. What a stupid question. It requires a subjective answer. Though I once got what does a pineapple not do after being picked, and apparently tap dance was wrong even though nobody on the room had ever seen a tap dancing pineapple. A guy argued that a baby grand piano was for little children during their earliest piano lessons, saying that's why they're called baby grands. I explained that the term baby grand simply refers to the smallest size of a grand piano, about 4 feet 5 inches long. He just insisted that baby grands were for little children, and that's why they're called baby grands. Why aren't they called child grands then? Surely babies aren't playing piano. Edit. Haha Asian. I get it. Please stop. Not your baby. My fancy, upgraded genius baby, however, practices 28 hours a day, 10 days a week. In HS football, the night before a game, we would get together and set goals for the game. Defense set the goal of 200 total yards of offense allowed. I corrected the to make it less than 200 yards. They disagreed adamantly and kept the greater than. I was tutoring 4 of them in math at the time. They also hit their goal. More than 200 yards given up. When I was in elementary school I had a hard time remembering which symbol meant greater/less than. Then I had a teacher draw a little eye above the symbol and draw some sharp teeth inside the symbol and told me the hungry mouth always faces the bigger number. Then I had to ask myself, is the number on the left greater than or less than the number on the right? I still mentally draw a hungry mouth. The big end is close to the bigger number. The small end is closer to the smaller number. I was trying to explain to my roommates that we can't leave our front door unlocked 24/7, especially when no one is in the apartment and when they're out and I'm sleeping, and that they should replace the keys they lost. Plus we're on a college campus where theft is pretty common and my room was broken into the previous year. Then, we live on a college campus so we're safe. What good is a locked door going to do if someone comes in with a gun? If something happens that's just life. We went around in circles for 27 minutes. Worst argument ever. College campus so we're safe. Oh man. He should know that in some cases, there is more crime on college campuses than in the general city they live in. What is worse, is that is reported crime, because colleges like to hide this information and keep it from being reported if they can. I wouldn't trust anything unlocked anywhere near a 5 miles radius of a college campus. Guy said that I could touch a black hole because they only targeted stars and planets. I wanted to die. I was trying so hard not to laugh. True, I have a pet black hole at home. Problem is, every time he's hungry he goes to music festivals. Poor artists. Why it's not cheaper to buy a new $1,200 phone on a 24-month payment plan than to fix a phone that's paid off with a broken screen. $150. Oof, my family falls for the small monthly fee thing a lot and it drives me nuts. I swear Rent-A-Center has a shrine set up for how much my mom has spent there. She usually has the money to buy outright, or could easily save up, but she honestly thinks it's a better deal because it's only $25 a week. That's basically nothing. They kept insisting that they were entitled to their opinion over something that was a fact. For some reason telling her that her opinion didn't sway the truth just made her double down. Situation. I mentioned that a certain YouTube personality was gay. I said it matter-of-factly, not to be mean. The guy has mentioned being gay on his channel several times. This girl got mad and girl kept denying he was into dudes. This was despite me pointing out that he openly identified as gay. She cited that it was her opinion to validate the dude's sexuality on what her stupid ass wants to believe. Opinions can be stupid, wrong, or both. Some opinions are also not even worth considering. I wish people would understand this. Shit, I wish my mom would. I had something similar happen with my mom several times. The worst one being when I tried to explain to her how the Wi-Fi works. She insisted that it was slow because Voyager, your computer is always on, and it sucks the data. 2. It didn't work on data and she didn't believe me when I told her so. Voyager, you're always playing games. I play single player games 99% of the time. I didn't know very well how it worked, and I actually don't remember shit at the moment, but back then I actually did some research on internet, asked my boyfriend, who is a programmer, repairs computers, and is generally more comfortable than me with this kind of stuff, and could point me to places where I could find the informations I needed about it. Then I went back to her and explained how the Wi-Fi worked, after aggravating me by interrupting and telling me I was wrong while I was trying to explain. She, very infuriatingly so, told me, well, can't I have my opinion? I am entitled to have opinions. I went berserk. I couldn't do it anymore. I just screamed back, you can't have an opinion on facts. If this is how IT works, this is how IT ducking works. It wasn't the best way to react, but she has a knack for making me so irrationally angry that I just react like that. Whenever I use words my mother never heard of and tells me to correct myself, I now have to actually get Google definitions to show her I'm not speaking nonsense. Cause I used to always lose those because she's the mom and older. Therefore she knows more than me. Holy ducking shit. I was in chemistry and we were gathered around a table and the teacher was asking about color of the samples and I said one looked amber. The whole class, teacher included, tried to tell me amber wasn't a color. I just had to let it go. If you're in the US, just talk about the ducking amber waves of grain, or how amber is the color of your energy. When my friend said that dinosaurs never existed and it was all a conspiracy perpetrated by natural history museums to deny God and make everyone atheists. Well, he worships a really small god. I think the creator of the universe would have a lot of fun with giant lizards. That's a great way to look at it. God made Jurassic Park but then got bored and switched to Westworld. I got into an argument with a guy who swore red cars were faster. His rationale was because Ferraris are always painted red, which is also not true. At first I thought he was just messing with me, but no. He really believed it and nothing I could say would change his mind. I finally gave up on arguing with stupid and told him how right he was. A guy who swore red cars were faster. He's probably just an orc from the Warhammer universe. That's orc with a K. Hume. I'll be finishing up my history degree in a few months. I really shouldn't be arguing my subject with people who've never had a reason to pick up a history book, but I was stuck with a buddy of mine for several hours a day for the better part of last year, and we got around to talking about pretty much everything. At one point, for one reason or another, we got to talking about the Comanche Indians. I mentioned a common misconception, and he countered with a stereotype that he learned in grade school. We went back and forth for a while, and I tried to reference books on the topic, but his response was always to restate the same stereotype and say I'm part Cherokee, so I know. Eventually, when he clearly had nothing left to say, he asked the most annoying question possible in that situation. Yep, well, were you there? How do you even respond to that? I definitely wasn't there, but neither was anyone else alive today, and accepting that argument would pretty much void all study of history. I pretty much gave up. He's not a dumb guy, but history is clearly not his field, and there was no way anything was gonna come of the argument. Can you specify what the misconception and his follow-up were? I'm curious. It was the old idea that the Indians used every part of the buffalo. It's technically true, but people tend to take the wrong meaning from it. The Plains Indians lived in an area where there wasn't much around besides grass and buffaloes, so they learned how to make a lot of stuff out of grass and buffaloes. But especially as demand for buffalo leather went up in the east, the number they killed far outpaced what they actually used. When horses were introduced to the Great Plains, the Indians, specifically the Comanche, got really good at killing buffalo. After a successful hunt, they'd strip the leather to sell. Then it wasn't uncommon that they'd use every part of one buffalo and leave the rest to rot. Most Americans know that the military hunted the buffalo to near extinction to take away the Indians' livelihood. And while that definitely happened, it was really the final blow to wild populations after years of overhunting by white settlers and Indians alike. The Indians' use of the buffalo is impressive as a featuring of resourcefulness, of survival in a harsh environment, not of oneness with the land or anything like that. The latter idea just plays into the old noble savage stereotype that the Indians were a bunch of super spiritual, peace-loving nomads who ran through the woods painting with all the colors of the wind, rather than an actual human society that adapted to its surroundings like everyone else. Edit for clarification, of course. Some Indians were very spiritual, some were peace-loving, and some were nomadic, but it's unfair to paint them all with a broad brush. And by and large, the Disney version isn't accurate. Edit 2. By and large, I hope it was worth everyone's time to correct that one. It's not usually logic I have trouble with, it's nuance. I'm really tired of the media being dishonest. I feel like it's the largest contributing factor to the destruction of our country. So if I correct the media and point out Beto O'Rourke committed a misdemeanor and is not in fact a felon and therefore can own a firearm, my conservative friends come back with guess you went to the other side. No, I'm just correcting an inaccuracy. Or if I say Trump didn't say X, that was taken out of context. What he really said was X, while all my liberal friends say you Trump supporters are destroying this country. Number. Dipshit. Read the words I said. This is the other half of the problem. People cannot think critically. They cannot evaluate a simple statement and pull meaning from it without it being tainted with bias. Correcting a person, story, anything, does not mean you don't support that person, story, anything. It simply means you've corrected an inaccuracy. We live in an era where if you do not propagate a lie, you are not on our team. Our team likes the lie. It's so ducking 1984 I can't stand it. The truth is all that matters. Search for truth, not confirmation. Duck. This drives me nuts. I was very critical of certain Obama policies, but I voted for him twice and thought he was a great president. I thought GWB had a very sensible and humane immigration plan that was never implemented because the Dems wouldn't work with him, but thought he was a horrible president overall. I think Fox and CNN are full of shit, but for two different reasons. Nuance just isn't allowed anymore. Oh man, I got into this argument with a co-worker the other day. He said he likes Trump because he doesn't like lying politicians and Trump doesn't lie. I called him out and said I agreed that politicians shouldn't lie, but he's crazy if he thinks Trump doesn't lie all the time, especially about things that don't even need to be lied about. He countered with pointing out every Democrat that had lied, and I just had to cut him off and tell him I agreed with that part of the conversation, just not how truthful Trump is. This was recent. Someone who doesn't run tried to tell me that running on a treadmill doesn't count because you can just lift up your legs and that the track does all the work. I tried to explain that while it isn't 100% the same as running outside, your body wants to stay relative to the moving track, so yes, you are propelling yourself forward, and many outside runners, myself included, run on treadmills at some point for training when the weather isn't cooperating. I'm pretty sure we would be able to tell if we weren't exerting any effort on the treadmill. He said that people who run on treadmills are lazy and we are all wasting our time pretending to work out. Okay buddy. At least in this case you can just tell him to run on a treadmill for 30 minutes since it takes no effort, and see how that turns out. Even if he was correct about just raising your legs, that just means you're running in place, which is still exercise. I'm a bartender. When I put a drink up to be run to a table in the restaurant, the servers have to put a garnish on depending on the drink. I see new guy standing there staring at the lemons. Ask him what the deal is and he responds, "These limes aren't ripe yet." Try to explain that's not how that works and guy tells me I don't have to be an a-hole. Suffice to say we've lowered our standards for servers lately. Some say he's still waiting for those limes to ripen to this day. Flat earth/Newtonian relativity. When I was still in school, I'd work with my girlfriend's dad on some weekends for some extra money, and I'd normally be the only college educated one in a field of grown blue collar men. When one of them learned that I was a physics major, he was very eager to prove that my entire education was wrong. He tried to argue that the earth doesn't rotate and therefore, still not sure how this even draws this conclusion, the earth is flat. His argument was that the duration of a flight going the same distance from east to west should be different than a flight going from west to east, because one way, you are flying with the rotation and one you are flying against it. I tried explaining relativity in the simplest terms possible. He understood throwing a ball when you're in a moving car/train, walking in a moving plane. Every possible example I could think of, I'd explain and he'd agree. When we got to a plane taking off being like the ball and the earth rotating being the moving car/train, I just completely lost him every time. He said it can't be the same and the liberals brainwashed me if I actually believe that. Planes taking the same route in different directions will take slightly different times, but I think that's due to air currents rather than the earth's rotation. Right. He was wondering why the 1000 miles per hour rotation of the earth didn't have an effect. Air currents definitely still have an effect, but not the hours of difference he was talking about. I once was innocently commenting about something on the news about the Pope. The idiot guy I was dating was like, "Hey, I don't want to hear about those stupid Christians. You can't trust any of them." I'm like, name. You're Lutheran, aren't you? Him. Yep, exactly. That's why I try to avoid Christians and their rants. 20-minute convo as I tried to explain to him what a Christian was and that he was one. Didn't understand, believe. Turned into a breakup convo for realizing how dumb he was. Yep, somebody tried to convince me that Catholics weren't Christians once. Not sure what denomination he was though. That is a shockingly common belief. Hell, I once met a Catholic who argued it. Whist getting a tour of our children's school garden. The teacher is rambling on about the different veggies and stuff they grow. We are walking by these giant sunflowers. Teacher, oh, these are sunflowers. For making popcorn. Me. You mean you add them to popcorn? Teacher, number. Sunflower seeds make popcorn. Me. I'm 100% sure corn kernels are used for making popcorn. Hence the name popcorn. She sighed and moved on, continuing to think I'm a hulking 6 feet 5 inches Neanderthal. Now we're at the herb section and she points at the thyme and rosemary. Teacher, this is thyme and rosemary. We use these to make chocolate. Me. What? You add those to chocolate? That has to give it a funky taste. I'm surprised the kids like it. Teacher, no, we don't add it to chocolate. Chocolate is made from them. I gave up questioning her at this point and finished the tour silently, contemplating how this woman can zip up her pants in the morning, let alone get a degree and teaching certificate. I had a high school biology teacher who was bad like that. This teacher would say things like Mars is hot. That's why it's red. She would have her kids in the gifted track do class walk like coloring, cutting, and pasting pictures of fish. The moment that most sticks out in my mind is when she was giving out corrected test grades. My original score was something like 48 out of however many points, and she added 5 points to that, which she calculated as 52. I told her I should have 53, because 48 plus 5 is 53. She said, no, look. Then she started counting on her fingers. 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, see, 52. Dear Lord, I had a test in health in high school and one of the questions was how much sleep does an average teenager need at night? The answer was 9 hours 15 minutes. But I wrote it as 9.25 hours. I got it marked wrong because the teacher thought I was writing 9 hours 25 minutes. I explained that 15 minutes is a quarter hour, which is the same as 0.25. She said I should have written it as 9. 1 stroke for then. I pointed out that his car mirrors were tinted blue. I just thought it was interesting. He got really offended, and when we actually looked at them to prove my point, he said one of the most baffling things I've ever heard. The mirrors are tinted. Reality is, I'm 14 too and this is deep. One of my college teachers gave us a test on computer hardware. One question was, what is the most important part of any computer? It was multiple choice. CPU, memory, motherboard. So, I told him that the question made no sense. All of the parts are necessary. No one is most important. Without any one, the computer would not work. He insisted that it was the CPU. Of course the question was flawed. The answer is obvious. The user. Duck's incoming chair. You must have misread the question. It was asking which part was the one that made it work, not the one that made it stop working. Cold air sinks. Hot air rises. Other person. But then why does ice float? Maybe he was just curious. Did you provide an answer? The floating ice was their argument for why they thought hot air sank and cold air rose. There were multiple people trying to convince this other person otherwise. It ended in tears. How to use to properly. I used to know how to do this to. Last time I needed to call the support, I needed to verify myself. The quite unfriendly sounding lady told me to give her a pin. I told her I never set up a pin. Her answer basically was I shall tell her the pin anyway. That went on around 5 times until I just hung up. Side note 1. You need to verify yourself before that step, which I did via temporary pin in an SMS. Side note 2. She never gave an option to do that or even set up a new pin. She insisted on giving her a pin that does not exist yet. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more interviews.